Really?
Jessica, it's such a treat. I loved our initial conversation. I'm just delighted to go deeper with you.
Yeah, me too, y'all. The audience won't know, but the first time we met, you were like there was a backdrop. You were like out in nature, just enjoying the trees and the birds. And I was like, can I come to your house? Like, let's just hang out. Yeah.
Anytime,
Out anytime.
anytime.
Anytime. Well, because not everyone here has met you. Start off, just tell us who you are, what you do, and then kind of how or why you got into the work that you are into.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Caverly Morgan, and I have been practicing something, Jessica, and what that is claiming out the gate what I'm committed to in this world. And I am committed to collective liberation. And you might have some listeners that are like, what the hell does that even mean? But it's really cool. I went to an
Yeah.
awesome leadership training
Yeah.
not too long ago. One of the donors through Peace in Schools sent me. He was like, "I think your whole leadership team needs this training," and it so many great things came out of it. And one of the things that came out of it was claiming what you're committed to in this
Hmm.
world. So collective liberation, what is that? I'm committed to realizing freedom together. I'm committed to us all being free and to that not being an individual process. What does it mean for us all to get to be free?
Yeah, okay, well, I have questions already. I mean, like y'all can listeners will be like, "Oh, this makes sense, the synergy," because I my signature framework is called the freedom formula, right? Like I'm all about when I was little, I was like, "I want to revolutionize the prison systems of America." And I worked in jail diversion, and then I was like, "Ooh, now my prison revolution is freedom from the prison of an unmanaged mind and freedom from the harsh inner critic, all kinds of freedom." So, I tend to think about it from maybe the individual liberation perspective, but tell me more about this collective liberation.
Yeah, and Jessica, by the way, you know I've done my homework on you, girl.
Oh,
So,
good.
of
Okay.
course, I know that our synergy is about freedom. It's about
Yeah.
getting unstuck. It's about
Yeah.
seeing what blocks us.
Yeah.
And so, what's interesting to me these days, after having spent so many years in a monastic setting, unpacking how I'm getting blocked in this individual way, I'm
Mhm.
now really interested in what happens when entire groups of people are blocked in particular ways. And what if we took these practice tools that work so well, in my experience, on a personal level, and
Mhm.
what if we applied these same tools collectively? And that's what the book, The Heart of Who We Are, is really all about. It's about taking the work of liberation from a mindfulness perspective,
Mhm.
an inner freedom perspective, and and it's about what shifts when we apply this stuff collectively, the tools of freedom, you could say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you just like subtle flex just dropped in this monastic setting. But for the listeners, do you want to share a little bit about your
Sure.
monastic history? Yeah.
Yeah. So I trained monastically in the Zen Buddhist tradition for 8 years.
Mhm.
And yes, it was a silent monastery. And yes, I was celibate. People like to know this shit. They're like, wait, what?
We want to know everything, Caverly. Okay. So to be clear, I mean, you're like, I was a monk for 8 years.
That's pretty much
Also
it.
known as, right? When we were like, wait, I was in a monastic site. So Caverly was a monk for 8 years in a silent, celibate monastery. Okay.
Yeah, we did talk at times, but if
Mhm.
we were talking about our practice. We were talking about what causes suffering, how we can be free of suffering. So we were applying
Yeah.
Buddhist practice to
Uh-huh.
that question. And then I left the monastery. So
Mhm.
I was going to say we were talking at times, but yeah, the talking took the form of, not only talking about our practice, but individual sessions with our teacher, and then group discussions with the other monks. And
Mhm.
then when retreatants would come on retreats, there's lots of talking during that. So I think it's
Uh-huh.
important to just acknowledge there was talking, but you're never with another monk sitting down to shoot the shit about, like, did you see that show last night? Or, at the monastery, you don't have an email address. You don't have your own phone. You're really surrendering to this disciplined training.
Well, can we all live vicariously through you and benefit from, I mean, come on. Like, how do I even ask the question? Like, okay, Caverly, like 8 years of that kind of living, something is happening. Like, you are like transformations, inner revelations, like levitation, I don't know, enlightenment. You're like, basically, you found your divinity and then decided to come back to the world. So I don't even know. Is there a question in there? But I'm like, basically, in my mind,
Basically, like, what did you learn?
yeah,
Is that
like
what you're asking?
what did you
Yeah.
experience? What did you learn? What did you experience? And why did you decide to leave it?
So those are really good questions, and I'm so cognizant of how short our time together is. So I'm going to try
Can
my
you just
best
summarize that in
to be,
14 minutes, please?
well, to be honest, it's valuable to try to be
Uh-huh.
succinct, and it's not one of my
Yeah.
greatest skill sets. So I'm going to give it my best shot. So I learned how suffering gets created. I learned, for example, before I went to the monastery, I
Uh-huh.
had no idea that I had any negative self-talk. You and I have both focused on like what is that conversation that you're having with yourself? How does it impact you in our different lines of work in the world? So I didn't even know I had that. I just thought it was real and true that I wasn't smart enough to be a veterinarian. But I write about this in my book, and it was a big deal for me when I went on my first retreat and I heard people revealing their negative self-talk, and I was like,
Hmm.
holy shit! I
Hmm.
never even heard this,
Hmm.
much less was able to disidentify from it.
Yep.
So it's really important that I learned how suffering gets created within me, but more important, even perhaps, that I learned how to disidentify, how to recognize that I am not my thoughts, how to see through the conditioned or habituated veils
Hmm.
that I had been so accustomed to just assuming were reality with a capital R.
Ah.
So that's one of the big learnings. And then
Mhm.
you asked a couple other questions, but I'll pause there because you might want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask all the things. Yes. So, for our listening guide, for a follow along here, suffering comes from the stories we're telling ourselves. Yeah. Like the negative self-talk. Is that what you're telling us? I mean, that's the version of, well, yeah, I won't, you tell me. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, that's one of the aspects of suffering that
Hmm.
I wasn't present to before I went to the monastery. But to I like that you're putting it in a nutshell. A nutshell would be suffering comes from identifying with the idea that I'm separate from life. And negative self-talk, I like to talk about it as the glue keeping in
Uh-huh.
place the story, the illusion that I'm separate from everything else, that
Uh-huh.
I'm this individuated
Uh-huh.
body mind,
Hmm.
and that's the totality of who I am. That's
Mm.
when suffering happens, is when I'm confused about who I actually am, and I
Uh-huh.
perceive myself only as these thoughts, the emotions
Mm.
that arise, this body mind, this limited self, which is
Yeah.
not the totality of who we are.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to that, the confused about who I really am. But before, I do want to finish because now, I'll go on 14 tangents. So I want to constrain myself to what was then your felt experience there. So you had some awarenesses of what's creating suffering, awarenesses of identifying with this separated self and the suffering that comes with that. And yeah, what was the experience like there? Because you can have cognitive awarenesses and then you can have shifts, like
Yeah,
felt experience shifts. So what was that
yeah.
like?
I love that my answer is all of it. Like
Uh-huh.
everything that a human can go through, I feel I went through in an internal way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very intentionally this cloistered environment where
Hmm.
it's just you and you. You're working out what's going on. And then, of course, because we all have the same um, we're interconnected. So we all have the same processes, or I could say different processes, but the same ways that we suffer. right? So
Hmm.
you might suffer over being, I know you're a perfectionist.
Uh-huh.
You,
Recovering perfectionist, Caverly, we're trying so hard. This is, y'all, we were chatting about the my upcoming book beforehand, and there were moments where I would laugh to myself because in the book I'm literally writing about overcoming perfection while I'm sending things
oh
back to
yeah,
the editor where
oh
I'm like,
yeah.
what are you even thinking? This cannot be okay. Like, can we try this? Can we try this? And I was like, they have to be reading the content of this going, ma'am, could you drink your Kool-Aid? Like, what do you? Because how we're human, right? So, yes, I might identify with the suffering of good enough and perfectionism.
Big
Mhm.
time, big time. I mean, we're both you're familiar with the Enneagram, right? I
Oh,
can't
uh-huh.
remember if we talked about this in our
Mhm.
prep call, but I'm gonna just go ahead and I don't think it's helpful to type other people, but I'm gonna go ahead and guess that you're a one on the
I am a
Enneagram.
one. Are you a one? Are we like like Katniss Everdeen, just
Totally,
hungry? We see each other.
totally.
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
see you, girl. I see you. And
Uh-huh.
so, that's just an example of getting to see something that's veiling who we truly are. When we
Yeah.
get stuck in it has to be just right, or it's a
Mhm.
reflection on my worthiness. And what do you
Mhm.
mean inherent worthiness? I have to prove that I'm worthy, and that's why I have to get everything just right. And so I'm with you.
Mhm.
So there's the monastic experience was a chance to see all of that conditioning
Mhm.
operating. It was a chance to see how my survival strategies, for just living my life, how they get triggered, what
Mhm.
throws me into them, what helps me disidentify. So in
Mhm.
that, what I can say about my monastic experience is there was a shit ton of suffering that
Yeah.
happened while I was there
Uh-huh.
because it's just me and me.
You can't hide
And
from it. I mean, what
there
you can't, or you
is
can't distract from it in the same ways.
no big time.
Uh-huh.
So there we were actually even encouraged not to read. So there were no distractions. So you're
Uh-huh.
you're really in it,
Uh-huh.
which the beauty is, if I'm going to comment on some of the things I learned there,
Uh-huh.
I learned that I have the capacity to be with what is. And that's a big deal. That
Hmm.
is a courageous place to stand in your
That
life
is a
to
liberation access point.
that's a liberation access point to
Yeah.
realize that you don't have to run from the very thing that you've always assumed
Yeah.
is not negotiable. It's a tiger. You have to run. You will die if you do
Yeah.
not run. And so I got to learn how to be with my own suffering. I got to learn how to see through it. I got to learn that I'm bigger than my suffering. I got to directly experience that I'm bigger than this body mind. I got
Mhm.
to have a completely different relationship with spirit or the divine or however everybody should just plug in their own word.
Yep.
I'm not afraid of the word God. I
Mhm.
totally acknowledge there's some recovering Catholics that might be listening to this, and that might not be a word that works for them. I
Mhm.
can roll with any way that someone wants to talk about what's bigger than the limited view of who you perceive yourself to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a, I love the way, what's bigger than the limited view of who you perceive yourself to be?
What do you are you down with the God word, Jessica? I don't
Yeah,
know.
so here's that. I was it's just so funny as you were talking about that. I was like, let's talk about that, right? Like, and I feel my armpits sweating, right? So that tells me like
You're like, what is this going to do to my brand?
no, well, right. I mean, so it's so funny because I'm in South Texas and like
Yep.
everyone, like we love sweet baby Jesus and mega
Yep.
churches and
Yeah.
like Christianity is the like the spiritual path of the masses, right? And as someone who works with a lot of people we are working through religious trauma
Yep.
as a licensed social worker talking about oppression and overcut like I understand the roles that sometimes religion has in holding people. And yet, I'm like, do we love a good worship music? Yes. Am I in a women's Bible study on Wednesday morning? Like, yes. Right.
Yep.
And do I love Kabbalah? Like, do I like study Kabbalah? And have I been in every morning for the last 10 years, A Course in Miracles? We get on
Yeah.
and we read a lesson from it. And I just feel like, I had sweaty armpits 'cause I'm like, we're going to talk about this. But as I'm talking about it, I feel so lit up and like alive that I'm like, for me, I really am like, it doesn't matter to me
Yeah.
what the language is. Like, I just want to be a part of it. And because when you're, I'll speak from the I, when I'm in these settings, and it honestly doesn't matter, like the various spiritual, sometimes there's language that I notice I have to filter through, like
Mhm.
that language, spiritual warfare, or like the enemy or sin. Like, sometimes that language is something that I'm like, oh, I have to filter that for me. But the connection to the people, to the thing, it's like the namaste. It's like, oh, there's something in me, that thing that's bigger than the limited perception I have of myself in me connects with that thing in you. And I'm like,
Absolutely.
this is where I'm supposed to be in this moment.
Yep.
Like it, yeah. So how is, yeah, that, so tell
All
me what
that.
that brought up for you. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
so much. I'm
Yeah.
sweating with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
really, from a place of this is the conversation that I wish was happening more widely,
Yeah.
especially in such a divided time in our world. Like, what if we could see how much we all long to recognize what is bigger than a limited view of who we actually are? And what if we could
Mhm.
drop the uh, distortions we have around, no, we're separate because you go to a Bible study group on Wednesdays and I go to a meditation group
Mhm.
on Wednesday. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's absurd to me. And that's one of the things that I got out of this monastic training is I went deep in one form,
Mhm.
Zen Buddhism. But the deeper I went, the more I got in touch with the heart of all spiritual traditions. And that's why if you go to my website now, to be honest, I haven't looked for this, but I would bet that the word Buddhist doesn't show up anywhere on my
Uh-huh.
website. It's one form that got me rolling and let me go deep, right? Like if you're looking for water and you dig a little bit over here and a little bit over here and a little bit over here, you may never get to water. You've probably heard that
Yeah.
analogy.
Mhm.
So there was something useful about saying, okay, I'm going deep with this one form.
Yeah.
But you asked one of the things, why did you leave the monastery? One of the things that it was like a shirt that was too tight. It
Mm.
got to the point where I recognized this one form is even too limited
Mhm.
from the perspective that I was interested in people at large. I knew that
Mhm.
not everybody was going to want to go to a Zen Buddhist monastery to find out who they truly are. So I wanted to know, okay, great, I've gone deep here.
Mhm.
There are some things about this form that suddenly feel very constricting to me.
Mhm.
They were useful, they helped me. Now it's constricting. So how can I get beyond what's limiting? And for me, again, that meant deeply going into the heart of some of these other spiritual traditions. So I got very interested in non-dual teachings.
Mhm. Mhm. Anything else? Because I'm like, yeah, I see. I'm like, well, because when you say like, how can I get beyond what's constricting? I'm like, yeah, okay. What? Tell us,
Yeah, what
Caverly.
is that?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I have found the most benefit from is doing a lot of practice around where am I confused about who I think I am? And
Mm.
where does that then veil who I actually am? And that's why I've appreciated your work so much. I mean, you're
Uh-huh.
really supporting people and seeing
Right.
what's veiling, what's getting stuck, what's getting in the way, what's
Right.
blocking. And I think, are you familiar with the term neti neti?
No.
So, in some spiritual traditions, neti neti is a way to refer to the practice of I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the idea is that eventually you're going to come upon who you actually are. If you
Yeah.
just keep naming, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I'm not these limiting beliefs, I'm not who my mother said I was, I'm not who society says I am,
Mhm.
right? I'm not my gender, I'm not my age, right? Like what you start to get clear
Mhm.
about what you are because you're negating through
Mhm.
your own direct experience everything else.
Yeah.
So that,
But we pause there for a second because
yes,
I notice myself feeling feelings. Like I feel a well of emotion. So I'm like, there's something important here and I want to honor
yeah,
that. And to say like, yeah, I mean, the title of this podcast is called Unblocked. And that came from the idea of it's about removing the blocks to the awareness of what is there. And that's what you're hitting on. I think, again, as the training as humans in human flesh suit, it's always like we're like gathering that. Like if we gather enough wisdom and enough answers, then we find the thing, we find the truth. But I think you're hitting on that real truth. And it's so hard. Again, for my humor, it was so hard to wrap my head around, like my actual brain around the idea that oh, it could already be there. Like it is about if I'm not this, if I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. It's behind that that the answer lies. Like it is a subtraction problem. Like the work is to remove, and that is can be very counterintuitive and countercultural to what we're taught. Yeah, yeah. You see a little
Yes,
smirk to tell me, yeah, what's
absolutely. Yes
yeah.
to all that. And the monastic training I was in was exclusively focused on this neti process,
Yeah. Uh-huh,
recognizing I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not
uh-huh,
this.
uh-huh.
What I love about the non-dual teachings, so these
Mm-hmm.
are teachings that come out of the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. And what I
Mm-hmm.
love about these teachings is they focus it's that's one way people talk about it is a direct path. You just go straight to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a let's pull this way, let's pull this way, this pull this way. It's not a sort of peeling of the onion as
Mm-hmm.
much as let's just go right now to the direct experience of who we are. And the first book that lit me up about practice was called That Which You Are Seeking is Causing You to Seek.
Right. Hmm. Same.
So,
Okay, but tell me, yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
tell me your interpretation of that.
Well, actually, because something just lit up for you,
Uh-huh.
tell me what it was, and I'll riff off you because I love that I could see that something just landed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like the truth behind that. Like I think it's it's not so again, while we're in these human flesh suits, it's easy to get distracted by all of the things. But what like when you were talking, I was like, that is the draw, the pursuit of truth, right? And I was hesitant to, and it makes sense that I like that you brought up also this story of when people say I'm a seeker, like sometimes I'll notice myself have a reaction to that because if you're seeking, then you're seeking, right? Like you're not finding. And so now I'm curious about what the book is that you mentioned there.
Yeah, it was a book that just the title alone turned some lights on for me
Uh-huh. Right.
because it allowed me to feel connected to something that it allowed me, I'll say this, it allowed me to feel a sense of connection that I couldn't feel when I was, as you're pointing out, so identified with being the seeker.
Right.
So if I'm longing for God, but I'm convinced that I'm the little thing that longs for God, but God is way far away, and
Yep.
now all my energies on trying to get connected to God, it assumes that I'm not
Already.
inherently
Yeah.
connected to
Yeah.
God. And so that story of separation is what I began to get incredibly compelled by in my life's work. What closes this perceived gap? How can we realize that the gap is actually a misunderstanding?
Yeah.
So we're not really unblocking anything because we've actually
Yeah.
never been
Yep.
separate from
Yeah.
God.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. Yes, let's go there because again, for 10 years now, every day for 10 years, I apparently can be a slow learner. That's the whole premise behind A Course in Miracles, right? Is the idea that,
Yes,
oh, the tiny mad idea that you thought separation happened never did happen, right? And it's
exactly.
like the journey to nowhere, right? Like you're just like there, you never left. You never left. And yet, in human form, I'm like, do we just get like built-in amnesia? Like, here's your flesh suit and here's your forgetfulness of your truth. So I would love to hear what you could. I like the way you said that. You're like, what closes the perceived gap of that separation? So, what is that for you? How do you close that gap?
Well, I want to acknowledge these two different pathways again
Mhm.
because in some moments what closes the gap is to be able to say, okay, wait, I'm not this strong emotion that's
Uh,
arising, or I am not these thoughts. And suddenly I'm no longer identified with this limited human flesh suit.
Mm-hmm.
right? With the meat bag.
Uh-huh. The
So
old meat sack that we're in.
the
Uh-huh.
meat sack.
Mm-hmm.
And yet sometimes the way to access it for me is to pause and remember
Mm-hmm.
that I can let my attention rest in my very being right now. When we were talking just a minute ago, I kind of skimmed over, our very being, and because I wanted to make that other point, but now we can go there.
Yeah.
Like I want to invite listeners in
Mm-hmm.
this very moment. What's it like to relax the attention, soften the attention instead of focusing outward on all the things, instead of even doing practices in which you're trying to recognize what you're not? What's it like to come home to being, to let the attention rest in yourself with a capital S,
Mm-hmm.
not this limited self, not the self that's striving, not the self who feels unlovable, but your big self, whole self, complete self.
Yeah. I hope people did that. Like even as you're doing that, like for, and you can share for like your felt experience of that. But for me, that feels so grounding and centered. And this is not a feeling, but like at
Yeah.
homeness. Uh-huh.
I think
Yeah.
it's a wonderful way to point to it that
Mm-hmm.
we are so habituated to not give attention to our very being because our attention's always going outward to all these other things
Mm-hmm.
that it's like we overlook home. It's just what you were saying about like, wait, so what did we just get amnesia? Like we forget the home of our being. And when we're
Mm-hmm.
forgetting the home of our being, we
Mm-hmm.
spend our lives with the attention blending with all the objects we're attending to.
Mm-hmm.
So we're aware of all these things, but the awareness and what we're aware of are all blended together. And we're really confused about the purity of awareness itself in that
Mm-hmm.
process. We it's like the awareness itself is in the backdrop of experience rather than at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So what I love about where you and I are going in this conversation is we're going straight to the heart of
Mm-hmm.
how simple it can be to just come home to
Mm-hmm.
your own being. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a fancy practice. You don't have to be a monastic or a monk for 8 years in order to access it. You've never not been it.
Uh-huh. Isn't that so isn't that I was not gonna say refreshing, that's not the word. What is the word like thank God, right? You're like,
Thank
oh, I'm
God.
never like you can't lose it, right? It's like the game that you cannot like it's rigged in your favor. Like, oh yeah, like relieving, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Huh.
Yeah.
That takes the edge off a little. Like
It
you're never
really
not
does.
yeah. Yeah.
It really does.
And speaking of, okay, never not it, because this is one of those questions, like the who are you truly? Like that's when I think it's in your book or it's like a question, like that's like a thing, right? For you, like how do you,
Yeah.
or what does it mean to be truly you? Maybe that's the question that you posed, right? So how do you answer that?
Well, I think the most important thing about the question, who am I,
Mm-hmm.
is that it becomes a place of inquiry for
Mm-hmm.
each of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because me just talking about the answer won't be as liberatory
Mm-hmm.
as someone walking around in their everyday life asking, who the hell am I? If I'm not my thoughts, I'm not all the things I've been habituated to believe. I'm not my conditioned patterns, like the patterns
Mm-hmm.
that are habituated by society, friends, family, culture, church. What what is this thing I call me? It's so intimate to my experience of being alive,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm starting to grok that it's not what I've been assuming it to
Mm-hmm.
be. So that inquiry is what's really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all that said, I
Mm-hmm.
think it is helpful that there are different ways we can explore that question.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the ways we can explore that question is we can
Mm-hmm.
ask, when I'm not caught in all of that conditioning, when I'm not caught in my survival strategies,
Mm.
who do I know myself to be? How do I experience myself? How, and that's when people start, like I'll just play with you right now if
Mm-hmm.
you're willing.
Yeah.
So what comes up for you when I say, when you're not those things, who do you know yourself to be?
Yeah. But I'm not my survival strategies. Who do I know myself to
You're
be?
not busy. You're not caught in being the perfectionist. You're not believing
Mm-hmm.
you're unworthy. You're not trying really hard to get people to like you. You're not striving for anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I have a couple things come up. Like one is, and like the 3D world level is very playful. Like,
Uh-huh.
very
There's
playful.
playfulness there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So you're describing an aspect of your being that can come forward when there's not all this conditioning
Mm-hmm.
blocking you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is interesting about what you did, Jessica, is you named you named something that most people would associate with maybe young children or
Uh-huh.
right, like we all can look at kids and be like, oh, they're so playful and we admire that about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we get older, it can be harder and harder to access
Mm-hmm.
authentic play, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now go back even farther. So
Mm-hmm.
now you're not describing the young Jessica that has less conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe your experience that's beyond conditioning or unconditioned? How do you describe that?
Oh, my brain wants to be like, that's so hard. Uh, how do you describe that? I think some of it, yeah, my brain is still saying like it's hard to describe it because it's like a stillness, like just it's like the here's what here's what's coming up for me. It's like you might know these people who meditate might also resonate with what I'm about to say is like there's times in meditation when I say it feels like when the universe like folds in on itself, like when it like touches itself. And I know as I'm saying it, I'm like these words are not doing it justice, but that's like the feeling. So behind the conditioned, like it feels like a spaciousness, a stillness, and I want to say like a nothingness, but that's not capturing the thing, the essence of what it is. But yeah, that's what comes up for me. Yeah.
I think that is perfect. There are two
Uh-huh.
things I want to reflect back to you.
Mm-hmm.
One is the power of the pause. It's
Mm-hmm.
powerful that what you first did when I put this forward to you is that you paused to find what was true in your own direct experience. And what you found immediately
Mm-hmm.
was there are no words there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you were like, that's hard to do.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
and then if you are going to grab words,
Yeah.
you grabbed words that are the closest we can get. That is it's our being is inherently still.
Mm-hmm.
It's vast, it's empty, it's open. It's it's the place where the universe is folding on itself because in the universe, there's nothing separate from anything else. So I project that what you're actually pointing to is a collapsing of the perception of separation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, from a Buddhist perspective, we might use the word that's where oneness is recognized. Now,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you and I have different body minds. You're over there in Texas, I'm up on Whidbey Island, but we're made of the same luminous suchness. That that there's a oneness out of which our separate body minds are arising.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you were, I believe that it's accurate of you to correct yourself in saying it's not quite, I think you said, did you say void or
Or like
nothingness?
nothingness, like
Nothingness,
that.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, from the perspective of that within us that sees ourselves to be separate, which is a way I talk about the ego, but I want to define it
Mm-hmm.
because from a
Yeah.
psychological perspective, people talk about it differently. But that's how I'm talking about the ego. It's the activity of the conditioned mind. It's that which sees itself as separate.
Mm-hmm.
So From the perspective of the ego, this this spacious openness of oneness that you and I are talking about
Hmm.
feels like a void. It feels like nothingness. It can,
Hmm.
from the perspective of ego, it's kind of nihilistic.
Hmm.
It's like, oh my God, not there. Because what life does that felt sense of separation have there,
Right.
right? But
Hmm.
from awareness itself or consciousness itself, or we could even say, if one is comfortable with it, from God's view,
Hmm.
it's a fullness of being.
Hmm.
All of existence is an overflowing of love, an overflowing of possibility. So there's fullness there. But from the perspective of a small separate self, it's like, oh, that looks like a
Vacant,
dark
vacuous. Yeah.
pit.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's so, that makes sense, right? And I think what's coming up is like, it's one of those things like if you are just listening to these words, it gets missed, right? Because it's such like as you're describing it, I'm like, oh yes, I've had that felt experience. Honestly, like earlier today, just between things, I just sat with my breath and I was like, what a gift, right? Like what a gift when you're like the breath. I mean, we talk about like the spirit, right? Like you're like that, you're breathing. It's actually the word, right, for breath um and or the word for spirit, right? Is that like you could just access it, right? And in those moments, I'm just like letting the whole world in on my woo, right? This is in those moments like yeah, it can seem like from the ego and from the human brain that you're like, oh, I need to do. But what I know is in that breath, I have so much more access, like so much more resourced, right? Because what you said, you're like, you can access fullness. You could access, like, this is like the one of the mantras I have, like, oh, I actually have access to the infinite wisdom and creativity of the universe, right? So when we're doing things, you're like, yeah, if you just pause and breathe into that, I could have access to that. That's incredible. Okay, friends, we just had a little technical difficulty. Maybe it was the ego, right? Like I was talking about being connected to the fullness of God, and I don't know, the internet was like, "That's enough, y'all. That's enough." So
Okay, kids,
we just had a
shutting this
little
down.
y'all getting a little too aware of yourselves here. So let's just kind of pick up there because what I was talking about was just these moments in the day where like maybe I'll take a breath to just and I access kind of what you were just talking about is like the fullness of God. I have access to the infinite source of wisdom and creativity of the universe that I access through the breath points. But I want to ask about how that fits in with, I know you have a framework called SNAP. And they know around here, I love a good acronym.
Okay,
So
good.
tell us what that, because I think in there, there's sort of like a pause moment, like being present to noticing and slowing down. So maybe walk us through the SNAP framework.
Absolutely. And in on my website, I have a video where I describe Snap. So if anyone's like, okay, I like the snapshot of Snap, no pun
Hmm.
intended,
Hmm.
there are ways to hear more details. But I just, in honoring of our limited time together, Snap is a way to return to presence when you're caught. So the first step is to see it, to see like, my God, my shoulders are up by my ears.
Hmm.
I'm having a big like a lot of churning in my belly. I'm sweating. Okay, seeing it, naming it. The naming, so S and then N. The naming is, oh my gosh, I'm being beaten up by the inner critic.
Hmm.
I'm about 4 years old right now. I'm identified with a part of me who's believing she's not worthy.
Hmm.
The A stands for allow, or it could be accepted if that works better for you. But it's the idea of allow is that it's connected to letting go.
Hmm.
So I had been teaching this process for over 20 years. And then Maggie Steele, who works for Peace in Schools, was like, people struggle with letting it go. Like, how do you let something go? Well, you have to allow it in order to let it go. And then she came up with this handy SNAP acronym, which I love. So
Hmm.
we're allowing it. And then what happens after we allow it, after we let it go? We return the attention consciously to presence.
Hmm.
And presence, I talk about presence as being aware of being aware.
Hmm.
So it's not like we're just saying, okay, let me focus on this candle flame that's in the present moment, but I
Mhm.
can't do anything else because I'm just trying to concentrate on this thing so I can get present because I know I'm suffering by having the attention in worry or regret or fear of the future. We're actually coming back to awareness itself when we return to presence. So we're coming back to what's always in the backdrop of our experience.
Mhm.
We're resting in that and we're letting that come to the forefront of experience rather than remain veiled.
Hmm. And so as you're saying this, I'm thinking about the people who who are like, what do you even mean awareness? Right? Like somebody who's like,
Yeah.
where we are really so caught up still just in the like I know you know my husband and he will often say like I wish our eyeballs looked inside of us right like but we're so because they look out like being able to go within
Yeah.
can be a very unfamiliar experience for some people. So I wonder how you support, like, again, I'm thinking of people who might be listening where they're like, I don't have a meditative practice. I
Yeah.
don't even know like what, like being present to awareness. Like, how do I know if I'm doing that? Like, what is
Yes.
even, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you fleshing this out. So, even in this moment, Jessica, we can say, are you aware of your surroundings? I'm
Mhm.
talking to the listeners, of course.
Yeah.
Are you aware of your surroundings? Are you aware of the sound of Jessica and my voices?
Hmm.
Are you aware of your own breathing?
Hmm.
So now, instead of just being aware of all those things, what's it like to be aware of the awareness itself? It's a turning the eyeballs back in
Hmm.
on itself. It's a
Hmm.
moment of pausing to let go of all the things we're usually aware of
Hmm.
and just feeling awareness itself, a live, aware being. So
Hmm.
many of us feel it right when we're falling asleep or right when we're waking up in the morning. It's like before there's all this content that the mind is busy with.
Hmm.
We love the experience of just being. I mean, that's why
Hmm.
don't you ask people sometimes, "Oh, I hope you sleep well." Aren't you
Right.
saying, "I hope you get to rest in
Yes.
being and not have your mind so activated by
Yeah.
all the things, all the things."
Hmm. Yeah. Rest in being. I like the way you said that. Yeah.
We
Just
just
rest in.
that's we all long for that.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
so it it doesn't have to be esoteric. These things can sound esoteric, but it's actually as simple as, can I come home to my own being? And then can I recognize that my being is not limited? My being is God's being.
Mhm.
Being is spirit. My being is right. So come up with the language
Yeah. Oh,
that
that reminds me. When you saying this, that reminds me of something that was coming up when you were saying something similar earlier. But like every time you start to, maybe it was when you were talking about the who am I really, or who are we truly? Because when you talk about that, you're like when we can become aware of our being and our being not being limited. I think of at least in my work, so much of the work we work through is like self-loathing, right? Like it's
yeah.
just it's so commonplace among humans to just to be like, oh, this idea of like, of course, like I mean, again, I think it's some of the conditioning around humility and just like a false sense of humility versus like when you start talking about being, I'm like, how can we cannot help but fall in love with ourselves.
Oh, girl, this, you are singing my song.
Yeah.
When we really feel our own being,
Hmm.
we realize there's nowhere else we want to live life from
Yeah.
because we feel that within us that all good things arise out of. We
Hmm.
feel the wholeness of who we are, the beauty, the peacefulness of being. Right.
Hmm.
And so you're absolutely right. Love lives there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little invitation, friend. Love lives there. Like it can be so, it takes practice, right? When we're like to quiet the monkey mind and to
Hmm.
lean into, but again, I would invite you to come back to this podcast and to whatever minute it was into it, where any of those moments where Caverly, where you started talking about our essence is the word I would, like in our
Hmm.
being and the truth of who, like, so that you can feel like that to me, like those some of the language, like that was very easy for me to drop in, like it, right? So
Hmm.
for people who are like, oh, the monkey mind, my monkey mind, she get loud, and it takes me some time to like settle behind it. But now I know I've got a fast pass because now, when I check in with my being and my essence, that felt like, oh, it wants to, the monkey mind wanted to quiet so that we could be present
Totally.
to that. And then just feeling the love. Yeah. Like, how could we not love ourselves when we actually sense ourselves?
When we feel who we really are,
Yeah.
there's no separation. The
Yeah.
separation has dissolved. And it
Yeah.
is actually the collapsing of separation
Hmm.
that we call love.
Okay. Yes. Okay. There's a definition. Yeah. Love is the collapsing of separation.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say that's true? Even
Yes.
I always actually like to use the example of lovemaking. I
Yeah.
mean, I was just talking about this with someone the other day on a different podcast, and it's beautiful to me that the French word for orgasm
Uh-huh.
is a little
A little
death.
death. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
so what's dying is the perception that we're
Thank you.
separate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we love that feeling of,
Yeah.
call it what you want, oneness, being aligned with spirit, connected
Mm-hmm.
to the divine, knowing God, feeling God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
We all long for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to point out, based on the things you were saying, that one could think of your very being like the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's ever present.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are a lot of clouds, storms, things that happen that make it seem like the sun goes away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the sun is actually never going anywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
we struggle, we suffer when we're identified with, but I am the cloud,
Mm-hmm.
or all there is darkness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask this because this is what's coming up for me. Because I'm like, listen, forget the rest of the day, Caverly. I just want to sit here and be in your presence because when I'm in your presence, then I'm in my presence, and I really like this feeling, and I just forget everything else. And so so then I'm on to myself, and I wonder if some listeners might be going here too, where it's like, yeah, this is amazing. And then there's life, right? As if,
Right.
again, as if it's separate, but like, what are some of the bridging tools, or like how do you personally do it
Mm-hmm.
where you get to like this is the way we walk in life, right? Like
Yes.
really letting, instead of it being like, this is what happens on my bolster, on my meditation pillow, this is
Yeah.
what happens in the morning during my journaling practice where I get to have the felt experience of my being. But like I want to stay high on this all day long, Caverly. I want to take this everywhere I go. How do I do that?
I like to talk about the difference that happens in your life when you move from thinking of practice, so a mindfulness
Hmm.
practice or a practice of contemplative prayer, whatever practice
Hmm.
brings you home to your being that you have. Again, as you're hearing, I'm not attached to Buddhism.
Hmm.
Whatever kind of prayer or remembrance practice brings you to what's most true for you
Hmm.
is sacred and precious. So I like to talk about not having practice be something at the end of your to-do list. Because what do you do
Yeah.
when you have a really long to-do list?
Hmm.
That falls off,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But instead of thinking of practice as something you need to bring into your life, bring your life into your practice.
Okay, tell me everything. Bring my
So your
life into the
whole
practice.
life
Okay.
is the practice of being in the presence of God.
Yeah.
Everything.
Hmm.
You're in the grocery store and you're asking, where is God now?
Okay, stop. That gave me a little goosies. Okay, I like that question. Hmm.
You're asking
Hmm.
as you are driving, Where is essence?
Mm-hmm.
What what's real and true in this moment? You're there at the bank. What's real and true in this moment? Is it the conversation I'm having with myself about how freaking low my bank account is and I need to worry about the future? And where where is truth
Mm-hmm.
here right now?
Okay, I'm gonna need that for all of my customer service. Anytime I call an 800 number, Caverly, this is where
You get
where is
riled up.
truth? Where is truth? I gotta work with a construction vendor. Where is truth? In my judgment toward the inefficiencies. That's that Enneagram one getting reared
But
up.
here's what's so beautiful, Jessica.
Yeah.
You know where your Achilles heels are.
Yeah.
You know where those moments where you
Uh-huh.
leave presence.
Yep.
Now, we never really leave presence, but you
Right.
know the moments that you're going to get
Yeah.
hooked
You lose
and
the awareness of it.
you're
Yeah.
going to lose the awareness.
Yeah.
But the beauty of that is you
Hmm.
now get to say, I'm up in my game. This
Yeah.
is where practice gets real.
Yeah.
I'm going
Uh-huh.
to be in that conversation that I know I usually leave
Hmm.
presence, and I'm actually going to have the priority not to end up on the other side of this conversation being right or getting
Hmm.
the money or whatever. I'm my priority
Hmm.
is to not leave that conversation without a recognition that I stayed in presence and I stayed in connection and I stayed in love and I stayed in intimacy. I stayed in you and I are made of the same thing, even
Hmm.
with someone who's being inefficient or wasting our time or
Hmm.
whatever, right?
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna levitate. We're gonna be levitating by the end of the. I'm ready for varsity level awareness.
You
Like
are.
AP Calc. We're ready. Level up the game.
And what's really fun about the way you're talking about it, Jessica, is even in how you're speaking,
Mhm.
you're letting yourself be playful. You're
Yeah.
it's this thing you named before.
Yeah.
If we let practice be play, it'll be fun. We'll want to do it.
Yeah.
Nobody can stick with any discipline that you just like is drudgery.
Yeah.
We stick with the stuff that is rewarding, that
Hmm.
speaks to the depths of what we actually most long for. So
Hmm.
yes, you will do this
Hmm.
because you love it, because
Yeah.
you'll only get more intimate with the
Yeah.
very thing you most long for.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is what's, and I'll share this because again, you've met Joe. And when we were dating, I don't know how this question, I'm sure I asked the question originally, like, what is it that you want out of a relationship? And then when it came back to me, I was like, oh, I want to go home. Right. Like
Oh,
I'm looking for, I'm like, listen, the fact that he didn't run, we don't know. He was apparently his little soul's like, I want to go home too. Right. But like, right. But like,
yeah.
I mean, but to the point of all of like the oneness here is like, yeah, this is a practice we do on our own. And it's a practice we do in relationship, right? Where you're like, yeah, we can go home and we're like, can I be present to my being? Can I be present to your being in that? And just the like synergistic value of that. Like, if nothing else, it feels good. Like, yes, I want to go home. All right, friends, technology is doing its thing today. It's okay. We will not be deterred. But I am just going to close out. I had just been talking about coming home to ourselves, coming home in our relationships. And so, in the spirit of that, I'm going to close out by asking Caverly the question I ask all my guests, which is, what does it mean to you to live an unblocked life?
Jessica, thank you. And for anyone who's actually looking at the video of us, I did decide to just turn the video off so I could at least get this question forward. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your patience with all this technical difficulty. I've actually never had a podcast that dropped twice. So I think you're right. I think we're just
Yeah.
hitting something that,
Hitting the big
you know,
good stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So something is like, oh, no, 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 you all cannot go
Y'all speaking
there.
way too many truths on here.
Yeah, exactly. Like static, static. Um, I think living an unblocked life is living the heart of who we are in
Mm,
every moment. That's an unblocked life. And that doesn't mean we're going to do it perfectly, right? We're going to have moments where we're like, oh, I was living my conditioned self fully on that one. But
mhm,
in those moments, we return. We say, okay, may I practice SNAP, for example? I see that I just got really identified with the conditioned mind.
Mhm.
I can name that it was just my own identification that created the suffering. That's just the conditioned mind. That's the naming of the
Mhm.
conditioned mind. I can allow that just happened. I can return right
Mhm.
now to presence. I can let that go. I can come back to being. I can come back, as you've been saying, to the home of being.
Yeah. That's freedom, friends, right?
That's freedom,
That's
friends.
freedom. That's freedom. This is so good. Like my essence and insights have been doing like backflips and cartwheels. Like we're
Mm,
having a great time over here. Despite the technology glitches, I'm here for it. It's fine. I appreciate the truths that you shared today and that I appreciate my being, getting to see your being and like them just like
yep.
frolicking about and playing with the wisdom and the offering. And I can't wait to hear what listeners get out of this because, and honestly, even as I'm saying that, listen, I love all of you listeners, but I am just like, I just know I got so much out of it. This is the
Mm.
collective liberation. I'm like, listen, bonus points of other people got value, but this was like soul food. This was just like nourishing for my soul. So I appreciate you, Caverly. I appreciate the wisdom and presence that you brought today. And I look forward to
Well,
talking to you again.
yeah, Jessica, I do too. And just know that the same is true for me. A huge reason I do this is because I want to live all day in every day with this being my focus. So, okay, I'll make it my job, you know?
Right? That's why
Yeah.
we do it. When people are like, why? Like,
Yeah.
listen, because this all day long, I just want to
Yeah.
be like accessing my being and help people get closer to their essence and being. Yay, us for making it our
Yeah.
jobs, Caverly. We did it.
Totally. Here,
Amazing.
here.
All right.
Okay,
Well, thank
thank
you
you,
so much for your
friends.
time, Caverly. I'll be in touch.
Perfect. Thank you so much.